I think that Fort Wayne is the best of all worlds in some ways, because it's big enough that there's a lot going on, and there's, as you guys know, plenty to report on each week. It's usually just making decisions on what you're going to cover. But it's also kind of small enough and insular enough that you can really get your head around like some of the key issues that are happening in our community. And it feels almost like everyone's having the same conversation. You know, I had this talk with my husband because we visit a lot of cities. I've lived in New York and I've lived in Indianapolis. My previous employer worked in Detroit, and so I did spend a good amount of time there as well, as you noted. But we were talking a little bit about how Fort Wayne almost does feel like New York in some ways, because when you live in New York and when you're keeping up with, you know, the news or the social scene, there's kind of like a sense that everyone on the island is talking about the same thing. So maybe not New York State, but New York City. There's kind of like, you know, key restaurants that are opening up and things that are happening that you can pretty much say like, it feels like everyone in New York is talking about the same stuff. Whereas even when you go to a city like Chicago, that's technically smaller than like a New York, or a Detroit that does have so many suburbs, there's so many different elements of things that people are talking about within the community. It's really hard to have one newsletter or one, you know, beat that could potentially cover, even dip its toes into everything that's going on. But the cool thing about Fort Wayne is that it does kind of have that same insular vibe, I think, in some ways that New York has, where it does seem like, you know, each week there's a big talking point that a lot of people are really interested in hearing about. And so that's really what we kind of try to focus on with the local, and just skim down a lot of the key points that, you know, if you're only going to read a couple things this week, these are the key stories we think you should pay attention to.